Dear Christopher, here is your friend Thomas the Tank Engine. He wanted to come out of his station yard and see the world. These stories tell you how he did it. I hope you will like them, because you helped me to make them. Your loving Daddy.
The island of Sodor is surrounded by beautiful blue sea. It has fields of green and sandy yellow beaches. There are rivers, streams, and lots of trees where the birds sing. There are windmills and a coal mine, and docks where the visitors to the island arrive. The island also has lots and lots of railway lines. Who's that puffing down the track? It's Thomas! Hello, Thomas! Hello, everybody! Welcome to the island of Sodor. Thomas the Tank Engine wouldn't stop being a nuisance. Night after night, he kept the other engines awake. "I'm tired of pulling coaches," he said one evening. "I want to see the world." The other engines didn't take much notice, for Thomas was a little engine with a long tongue. But one night, Edward came to the shed. He was a kind little engine and felt sorry for Thomas. "I've got some freight cars to take home tomorrow. If you take them instead of me, I will push coaches in the yard." "Thank you," said Thomas. "That would be nice." Next morning, Edward and Thomas asked their drivers, and when they said yes, Thomas ran off happily to find some freight cars. Now the freight cars were silly and noisy. They talked a lot and don't attend to what they are doing. And I'm sorry to say that they play tricks on an engine who is not used to them. Edward knew all about the freight cars. He warned Thomas to be careful, but Thomas was too excited to listen. Shunter fastened the coupling, and when the signal dropped, Thomas was ready. The conductor blew his whistle. "Peep, peep," answered Thomas, and started off, but the freight cars weren't ready. "Oh, oh," they screamed. "Wait, Thomas, wait! Wait, Thomas, wait!" But Thomas wouldn't wait. Come on," he puffed. "All right, don't fuss. All right, don't fuss," grumbled the cars. Thomas began going faster and faster. "Whoosh!" he whistled as he rushed through Henry's tunnel. "Hurry, hurry," called Thomas. He was feeling very proud of himself. But the cars grew crosser and crosser. At last, Thomas slowed down once he came to Gordon's Hill. "Steady now, steady," warned the driver as they reached the top. His driver put on the brakes. We're stopping, called Thomas. "No, no, no, no," answered the trucks, bumping into each other. Go on! Before the driver could stop them, they had pushed Thomas down the hill and were rattling and laughing behind him. Poor Thomas tried hard to stop them from making him go too fast. Stop pushing, he hissed. But the cars took no notice. Go on, they giggled in their silly way. There's the station. Oh dear, what shall I do? Cried Thomas. They rattled straight through and swerved into the goods yard. Thomas shut his eyes. I must stop. When he opened his eyes, he saw he had stopped just in front of the buffers. There watching him was Sir Topham Hatt. What are you doing here, Thomas? He asked. I brought Edward's freight cars, Thomas answered. Oh, why did you come so fast? I didn't mean to. I was pushed, said Thomas. You've got a lot to learn about freight cars, Thomas. After pushing them about here for a few weeks, you'll know almost as much about them as Edward. Then you'll be a really useful engine. Toby the tram engine was getting excited. He was wearing a brand new bell that shone like gold. They were off to the seaside. His driver was explaining everything as they puffed along the line. There's a seaside village near here, and every year they have a big parade with a special attraction for all the visitors. This year, Toby, you're the special attraction. Thank you, sir, said Toby. But what does a special attraction do? Oh, just smiles and blows whistles to everyone, replied his driver. Listen, we're almost there. We can hear the seagulls. Soon, they reached a little station by the village. But instead of there being a big welcome, there was just one man. He whispered to Toby's driver and turned sadly away. Well, if that doesn't take the biscuit, said Toby's driver. They've run out of room in the parade and don't need a special attraction after all. We gotta go home, Toby. I'm sorry, old boy. So am I, sighed Toby, and they puffed sadly away. Percy was shunting in the yard. He didn't expect to see Toby. What are you doing back so soon? Asked Percy. Before Toby could reply, Sir Topham had arrived. Leave those cars here, Percy. There's an emergency at the harbour. Come on, Percy, said his driver. This'll be trouble with Bulstrode. Who's Bulstrode? Wondered Percy. He was still surprised about Toby, and now he had two puzzles to sort out. His driver explained. Bulstrode is a disagreeable barge and he never stops complaining. His driver is right about Bulstrode. Today, the barge was more bad-tempered than ever. Come on, come on! Why aren't you cars where you should be? There's no engine, and we can only go where we're put, shouted the freight cars. You're in the wrong place, not us. When Percy arrived, Bulstrode was sulking and the cars were crosser still. Our stone is for Bulstrode, said one of the freight cars. Please put us in a siding so we can load him up and be rid of him. But when Percy was shunting the freight cars were being careless. And then, without warning, they burst through the buffers. The freight cars fell on top of Bulstrode. Oops. Cried Bulstrode. Serves you right, giggled the freight cars. You are always barging in and moaning. It took a very long time to clear the mess. Percy watched as Bulstrode was towed to the beach. There you are, said one of the workmen. Now you can just stay here. Children can play in you all day, and at long last you'll be useful. When Percy got home, he and Toby exchanged all of their news. Well, we both had some seaside surprises today, laughed Toby. But Driver says I'm a special attraction anyway, and so are you. Every time we go on our own line. What do you mean? Asked Percy. Well, all we have to do is smile and blow whistles at everyone. The engines on the island of Sodor like feeling responsible, reliable, and really useful. They work hard to complete their jobs on time. They don't like confusion and delay. But the troublesome trucks delight in mischief, and their mischief causes trouble. As poor Henry found out. That night, Sir Topham Hatt came to Tidmouth Sheds. Henry has been in an accident and has been sent for repairs, said Sir Topham Hatt. There are no other engines available, so you have to work with Diesel until Henry is repaired. Yes, sir, puffed the engines, but they weren't happy. The engines didn't like Diesel. Diesel was always being rude and always showing off. I hope Henry's mended soon, said Percy. He moves more trucks than 3 Diesels put together, agreed Thomas. Trucks are nobody's friends, huffed Gordon. The next day, Diesel was working at the docks. Once Sir Topham Hatt sees how good I am, he bragged to the trucks, he'll scrap steam engines once and for all. This gave the troublesome trucks an idea. When Diesel shunted them together, they started to sing. Is that all you can haul? Henry's loads are longer. Is that all you can haul? Henry must be stronger. This made Diesel cross. He was sure he was stronger than Henry. I'll push you all at the same time, he said. The trucks began to giggle again. Push us all, that's the longest, push us all, you'll be the strongest. That's me, said Diesel, the world's strongest engine. Diesel wasn't done shunting the freight cars. He shunted 5 more, which equaled 15 freight cars. And then he shunted 5 more freight cars, which equaled 20 freight cars. "What's Diesel doing?" asked Percy. "Diesel thinks he can be the world's strongest engine," replied Thomas. Diesel didn't know the shunters had set the brakes on the trucks. The troublesome trucks knew, but encouraged Diesel to push anyway. "Push! Push! Push!" Diesel pushed, then he pushed, then he pushed, and then he pushed. But the freight cars didn't move. So Diesel tried to pull them instead. Heave-ho, you can pull, but we won't go, sang the trucks. This made Diesel even more cross. He pulled, and he pulled, and he pulled, and then he pulled, until suddenly the chain snapped. Help! The trucks just laughed when they saw the crash. "Grease and oil," Diesel sulked. Sir Topham Hatt looked down crossly at Diesel. "I thought you could be a proper dockyard, Diesel, but I was wrong," he said. "Can you make up for lost time, Henry?" "Oh, yes, sir," Henry replied happily. He backed up to the freight cars, and the shunters released the brakes. And he pulled away as easy as pie. Diesel was sent home in disgrace, and the engines had learned a lesson. "Even troublesome trucks can do you a favor," chuffed Thomas. "Like getting rid of a smelly old Diesel," puffed Percy. Thomas the Tank Engine was grumbling to the other engines. "I spend my time pulling coaches about, ready for you to take out on journeys." The other engines just laughed. "Why can't I pull passenger trains too?" "You're too impatient," they said.
You'd be sure to leave something behind.
"Rubbish," said Thomas. "I'll show you." One night, he and Henry were alone. Henry was ill. The men worked hard, but he didn't get better. And when the sun began to rise over the sheds, Henry was still feeling ill. Henry usually pulled the first train, and Thomas had to get his coaches ready. "If Henry is ill," he thought, "perhaps I shall pull his train today." Thomas ran to find the coaches. Come along," he fussed. There's plenty of time, they grumbled. Thomas took them to the platform and wanted to run around in front at once. But his driver wouldn't let him. "Don't be impatient, Thomas," said his driver. Thomas waited and waited. The people got in. The conductor and station master walked up and down, and the porter banged the door. But still, Henry didn't come. Thomas got more and more excited. Sir Topham Hatt came to see what was the matter, and the conductor and station master told him about Henry. "Find another engine," he ordered.
But there's only Thomas.
They said. "Well, you'll have to do it then, Thomas. Be quick now." So Thomas ran round to the front and back down on the coaches ready to start. "Let's not be impatient," said his driver. "We'll wait till everything is ready." But Thomas was too excited to listen. What happened then, no one knows. Perhaps they forgot to couple Thomas to the train, or perhaps the driver pulled the lever by mistake. Anyhow, Thomas started without his coaches. As he passed the signal tower, men waved and shouted, but he didn't stop. "They're waving because I'm such a splendid engine," he thought importantly. "Henry says it's hard to pull trains, but I think it's easy." "Hurry, hurry," he puffed, pretending to be like Gordon. "People had never seen me pull a train before, and it's nice of them to wave." And he whistled. "Thank you." And then he came to a signal at danger. "Bother," he thought. "I must stop, and I was going so nicely too. What a nuisance signals are." He blew an angry beep beep on his whistle. The signalman ran up. "Hello, Thomas," he said. "What are you doing here?" "I'm pulling a train," said Thomas. "Can't you see?" "If you're pulling a train, then where's your coaches then?" Thomas looked back. "Why, bless me," he said, "if we haven't left them behind." "Yes," said the signalman, "you better go quickly and fetch them." Poor Thomas was so sad he nearly cried. "Cheer up," said his driver. "Let's go back quickly and try again." At the station, all the passengers were talking at once. They were telling Sir Topham Hatt what a bad railway it was. But when Thomas came back, they saw how sad he was and couldn't be cross. He was coupled to the train, and this time he really pulled it. Afterwards, the other engines laughed at Thomas and said, "Look, there's Thomas, who wanted to pull the train, but forgot about the coaches." But Thomas had already learned not to make the same mistake again. Thomas is a tank engine who lives at the big station on the island of Sodor. He's a cheeky little engine with 6 small wheels, a short stumpy funnel, a short stumpy boiler, and a short stumpy dome. He's a fussy little engine too, always pulling coaches about ready for the big engines to take on their long journeys. And when trains come in, he pulls the empty coaches away so that the big engines can go and rest. Thomas thinks no engine works as hard as he does. He loves playing tricks on them, including Gordon, the biggest and proudest engine of all. Thomas likes to tease Gordon with his whistle. "Wake up, lazy bones! Why don't you work hard like me?" "Just great. Just great." One day, after pulling the big express, Gordon had arrived back at the sidings very tired. He was just going to sleep when Thomas came up in his cheeky way. "Wake up, lazy bones! Do some hard work for a change! You can't catch me!" And he ran off laughing. Instead of going to sleep again, Gordon thought how he could get back at Thomas. One morning, Thomas wouldn't wake up. His driver and fireman couldn't make him start. His fire went out and there was not enough steam. It was nearly time for the express. The people were waiting, but the coaches weren't ready. At last, Thomas started. Oh dear, he yawned. He fussed into the station where Gordon was waiting. "Hurry up, you," said Gordon. "Hurry up yourself," replied Thomas. Gordon began to make his plan. "Yes," said Gordon, "I will." Gordon reversed quickly and was coupled up to the train. "Get in quickly, please," he whistled. Thomas usually pushed behind the big trains to help them start, but he was always uncoupled first. This time, Gordon started so quickly, he forgot to uncouple Thomas. Gordon's chance had come. Come on, puffed Gordon to the coaches. The train went faster and faster. Too fast for Thomas. He wanted to stop, but he couldn't. "Beep, beep, stop, stop!" Hurry, called Gordon. You can't get away, laughed the coaches. Poor Thomas was going faster than he had ever gone before. He was out of breath, and his wheels hurt him, but he had to go on. "I shall never be the same again," he thought sadly. "My wheels will be quite worn out." At last, they stopped at the station. Behind Thomas was a nice empty siding with a water tower above it. Thomas reversed into the siding. Thomas was tired, but was glad to finally have a rest. But Thomas also felt very silly, and he thought about everyone laughing at him. "Well, little Thomas," chuckled Gordon, "now you know what hard work means, don't you?" Thomas was too tired to even respond to what Gordon was saying. After Thomas's long drink, he went home very slowly and was careful afterwards never to be cheeky to Gordon again. It was a beautiful morning on the island of Sodor. Thomas the Tank Engine's blue paint sparkled in the sunshine as he puffed happily along his branch line with Annie and Clarabelle. He was feeling very pleased with himself. "Hello, Thomas," whistled Percy. "You look splendid today." "Yes, indeed," boasted Thomas. "Blue is the only proper color for an engine." "Oh, I don't know. I like my brown paint," said Toby. "I've always been green. I wouldn't want to be any other color either," added Percy. Well, anyway," huffed Thomas. "Blue's the only proper color for a really useful engine. Everyone knows that." Percy said no more. He just grinned at Toby. Later, Thomas was resting when Percy arrived. A large hopper was loading his freight cars full of coal. Thomas was still being cheeky. "Careful," he warned, Watch out with those silly cars. Go on, muttered the cars. And by the way, went on Thomas, those buffers don't look very safe to me. The last load poured down. Help! I'm choking! Cried Thomas. Get me out! Percy was worried, but he couldn't help laughing. Thomas's smart blue paint was covered in coal dust from smoke box to bunker. Ha ha, chuckled Percy. You don't look really useful now, Thomas. You look really disgraceful. I'm not disgraceful, choked Thomas. You did that on purpose. Get me out. It took so long to clean Thomas that he wasn't in time for his next train. Toby had to take Annie and Clarabelle. Oh, Thomas, whispered Annie to Clarabelle. They were most upset. Thomas was grumpy in the shed that night. Toby thought it a great joke. But Percy was cross with Thomas for thinking he had made his paint dirty on purpose. Fancy a really useful blue engine like Thomas becoming a disgrace to Sir Topham Hatt's railway. Next day, Thomas was feeling more cheerful as he watched Percy bring his cars from the junction. The cars were heavy, and Percy was tired. Have a drink, said his driver, then you'll feel better. The water column stood at the end of the siding with the unsafe buffers. Suddenly, Percy found that he couldn't stop. The buffers didn't stop him either. Oh, wailed Percy. Help! The buffers were broken, and Percy was wheel deep in coal. It was time for Thomas to leave. He had seen everything. Now Percy has learned his lesson too, he chuckled to himself. That night, the two engines made up their quarrel. I didn't cause the accident on purpose, Thomas, whispered Percy. You do know that, don't you? Of course, replied Thomas. And I'm sorry I was cheeky. Your green paint looks splendid again, too. In future, we'll both be more careful of coal. James is a mixed traffic engine. He can pull both freight cars and coaches. He's proud of his smart red paint, and so is his driver. Everyone says you brighten up their day, James. One morning, James whistled loudly to the other engines. Look at me. I'm the smartest, most useful engine on the line. Rubbish, replied Thomas. We're all useful. Sir Topham Hatt says so, and he's head of the whole railway. You know what, James? Added Percy. What? Replied James. You're getting all puffed up. James huffed angrily away. Later, he was still boasting. I'm the pride of the line.
I saw you pulling freight cars,
snorted Gordon.
You're only a goods engine.
I pull coaches too.
Not as much as I do.
But Sir Topham Hatt has plans for me. James was only making this up, but Gordon believed him.
What plans?
Just wait and see. Oh, dear. Now what'll I do? Thomas was shunting shiny new coaches. Are these coaches for me? Asked James hopefully. No, these are for Gordon's Express. I'll fetch your freight cars next. But James was gonna play a trick on the other engines. Actually, Thomas, I'm taking the coaches. Sir Topham Hatt asked me to tell you. What about the cars? Asked Thomas. Give them to Gordon. Come on, Thomas, said his driver. Orders are orders. So when James's driver returned, James was coupled to the coaches and puffed away. Thomas returned with the freight cars, and a few minutes later, Gordon arrived.
Where's the express?
Thomas told him about James. And so, here are your cars. Gordon was very cross, and so was his driver. Wait till Sir Topham Hatt hears about this. Meanwhile, James was enjoying himself enormously. What a clever plan! What a clever plan! He chuffed. And then he saw Sir Topham Hatt. Some jokes are funny, but not this one, James. You have caused confusion. Yes, sir, said James. You will now stay in your shed until you are wanted. The other engines teased James.
I wonder who'd be pulling the express today,
Said Gordon.
I expect it'll be you.
Replied Henry.
James is stuck in the shed for being silly.
James felt sad. Next morning, he went back to work. Hello, whistled Thomas. Good to see you out and about again. I'm sorry I tricked you, said James. Are these my cars? Yes, replied Thomas kindly. They're pleased to have you back. James set off to the harbor with his train of freight cars. He bustled all day, pushing and pulling them into place. Time to go home now, James, said his driver at last. No cars or passengers, just we two. But his driver was wrong. Excuse me, called a man. I have a meeting with Sir Topham Hatt and I mustn't be late. May I ride back with you? Of course, replied James's driver, and then he whispered to James. This gentleman is a railway inspector. James was most impressed. He steamed along the line as smoothly and quickly as he could. Sir Topham Hatt waited on the platform, and the railway inspector greeted him warmly. This clever engine gave me a splendid ride. You must be proud of him. Yes, indeed. Once again, you are a really useful engine. Toby and Henrietta were enjoying their new job on the island of Sodor, but they do look old-fashioned and did need new paint. James was very rude whenever he saw them. Yeah, what dirty objects, he would say. At last, Toby lost patience. James, he asked, why are you red? I am a splendid engine, answered James, ready for anything. You never seen my paint dirty. Oh, said Toby innocently, that's why you once needed bootlaces, to be ready, I suppose. James went redder than ever, then snorted off. It was such an insult to be reminded of the time a bootlace had been used to mend a hole in his coaches. At the end of the line, James left his coaches and got ready for his next train. It was a slow freight train, stopping at every station to pick up and set down freight cars. James hated slow freight trains. Dirty cars and dirty sidings. Starting with only a few, he picked up more and more freight cars at each station till he had a long train. At first, the freight cars behaved well, but James bumped them so crossly that they were determined to get back at him. Presently, they reached the top of Gordon's Hill. Heavy trains halt here to set their brakes. James had had an accident with freight cars before and should have remembered this. Wait, James, wait, said the driver, but James wouldn't wait. He was too busy thinking what he would say to Toby when they next met. The freight car's chance had come. Hurrah, hurrah, they laughed, and banging their buffers, they pushed James down the hill. Yelled the freight cars. I got to stop! I got to stop! Groaned James. Through the station they thundered. Disaster lay ahead! Something sticky splashed all over James. He had run into some tar wagons and was black from smoke box to cab. He was more dirty than hurt. Toby and Percy were sent to help and came as quickly as they could. Look here, Percy, exclaimed Toby. Whatever is that dirty object? That's James, didn't you know? It's James's sheep, said Toby, but James is a splendid red engine, and you never see his paint dirty. James pretended he hadn't noticed. Toby and Percy cleared away the unhurt cars and helped James home. Sir Topham Hatt met them. Well done, Percy and Toby. And then he turned to James. Fancy letting your freight cars run away. I am surprised. You're not fit to be seen. You must be fixed at once. Please, sir, can me and Henrietta get a new coat of paint? Certainly, Toby. Thank you, sir, said Toby. All James could do was watch Toby as he ran off happily with the news.